My name is Dr. Audrey Hunt and I'm an educational psychologist with West Sussex. This is designed to be a very general webinar just to help you support your child with their emotional well-being during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm sure there's lots of things that you've already been doing. This may just give you a few extra ideas or things that you can build upon. This is a time of uncertainty and a lot of children and young people will be anxious and feeling worried about what is going on. This is a normal response to the situation. There's a lot of information available, which is great, but it can also be confusing. We will offer some ideas about what adults can do to support children and young people in the current situation. The advice is based on the work of many eminent academics and practitioners in this field. For example, Emerging Minds, University of Reading, University of Oxford, University of Sussex and Sussex Partnership NHS Trust. We will cover ways to respond to children and how and when to talk about worries. We will point out some useful links and resources. How can we as parents raise happy, confident children when we feel anxious ourselves? We will also touch upon the importance of looking after ourselves. Remember, you are making your child's well-being a priority at this difficult time. You are clearly a good parent. When they have caring parents, children are incredibly resilient. They will be fine. We may often ask ourselves, should I talk to my children about this? Yes, do talk about it. It's tempting to try and shield children from knowing about frightening things, but chances are they've heard about it at school or elsewhere, and in all likelihood they would have heard things that have scared them. They've also probably heard things that are just plain wrong, so do answer any questions that your children have, and if they don't ask, try and start a conversation with them. Keep your tone light and casual. Try and keep the worry out of your face and out of your voice. It's perfectly understandable if you're feeling anxious and worried yourself at the moment, and you may have some very difficult challenges to negotiate. Do look out for things that help you to cope. This will make it much easier for you to be able to respond in the way that you want when talking to your child. Where it's possible, try and maintain normal routines as much as possible. For example, in relation to food, sleep. Routines help children and young people to feel safe. Getting outside in nature can also be beneficial, as long as the medical advice permits. Try and spend some time outside with children. If they're not able to, or do not want to leave the house, encourage them to get some exercise at home. There are lots of free apps or YouTube videos. Many of us are feeling quite anxious at the moment, but if you're really struggling, talk. Call a friend, a relative, talk to a partner, but try to make sure that your children do not overhear these conversations. Little ears are surprisingly good at hearing things when they want to. So if you're having a big worry session, make absolutely sure no children can overhear. If we feel anxious, it's easy to become overprotective. This can be quite bad for kids. Obviously, we need to be quite protective about things at the moment, but try to stop this from spilling over into other areas of your child's life. It's okay to swing on the climbing frame and be out of sight for a few minutes if this is what they normally do. If you find talking about COVID too upsetting, it's okay. Delegate to someone else if you can. Anyone you can trust to talk good, calm sense. Be kind to yourself. Celebrate successes. We are in a unique situation. We are doing the best that we can in the best way we know how. There are some behaviours that it's easy to get into at this time, but that can make anxiety worse in the long run. Be on the lookout for these and other behaviours. Encourage your child to notice what helps and those things that end up making them feel more anxious. Some of these things are listed, for example, avoiding things, withdrawing from other people, constantly Googling for information, spending a lot of time talking about worries and being on the lookout for danger, checking news updates a lot, being in your own head thinking about things rather than fully doing things, washing hands at a level that kind of goes beyond medical advice. Children and young people will also be looking to the adults around them for clues on how they should be responding and whether they should be worried. So do try to keep your responses in check during conversations. That's not to say that you need to hide your worries. To the contrary, it's important to help children and young people recognise that a certain amount of anxiety and stress is normal and see how to deal with it. For example, when I'm worried about this, I like to call my friend. Shall we call your friend to talk to them? It's okay for them to know that adults worry too, but they will feel more scared and find it hard to share their worries if they see adults feeling overwhelmed. It's good to talk about worries and listen to children and young people's concerns. Try to make time and space. They won't always let you know that they want to talk, so look out for signs, such as them saying closer to you than usual. It's great if you can talk at the time that they raise the worries, because clearly they are feeling able to talk to you at that time. But we know that this isn't always possible, and it's important to talk at a time when both you and they are not stressed, busy or tired. It can also be helpful to avoid discussing worries immediately before bedtime. Things often seem scarier and more worrying at these times. If children raise concerns or worries, let them know that you've heard their worry and that you definitely want to talk to them, and maybe agree another time to have the conversation and stick to the plan. Then perhaps come up with some other things they can switch to thinking about instead of engaging in worry. The key characteristics of situations that create worry and anxiety are a heightened sense of uncertainty, potential threat and responsibility, and a reduced sense of control. So it's easy to see why our current circumstances are fueling anxiety. So in conversations with children, it's important to help them to recognise that it's understandable to feel worried or anxious, to develop an accurate and realistic understanding of the situation, and to recognise simple and practical things that they can do, but also be clear about the limits of their own responsibilities. And we're going to talk through some steps that might be helpful. Step 1, being curious and acknowledging their fears and worries. Start with open questions. These are questions that can't be answered with a simple yes or no. For example, what are your worries about this? What have you heard about the virus? Older children may have picked up information online or through friends, so do explore what sort of things they have been hearing. This will all help you to understand any fears and worries that they have. Acknowledge how their thoughts must be making them feel. Try not to minimise or dismiss worries. For example, oh, it'll be fine, or don't be silly. This can lead children to feel that their concerns are not being taken seriously, which may make them reluctant to talk about them, rather than come back and share thoughts or ask questions in the future. It is also hard to control what thoughts pop into our heads, so rather than saying, oh, don't think about it, encourage them to notice the thought, but to try and engage in it. There's that annoying worry thought again. What could you think about instead? Step 2, helping them to feel understood and that their worries are normal. Acknowledge that it is an anxiety-provoking time for everyone, and it's normal to feel worried. For example, if a child is worried about their grandparents, you might say, I can see that you're worried about your grandma and grandpa. I'm a bit worried about them too. And then follow up with the points later on in this webinar. Recognising that things will be different for a while and that this might mean that they feel disappointed. The things that they are looking forward to or enjoy are cancelled. This disappointment is understandable and it's okay. Step 3. Gently correct any misunderstandings that they may have. After noting their worries and showing you understand, you can gently share facts to correct any misunderstandings. A child may think because the virus is in their town that everybody's going to die. You can respond by saying, I can see that you're scared that someone down the road has the virus, and it isn't very nice knowing someone that lives near us is ill. But that doesn't mean that we're going to die, and in fact most people who get it just get a fever and a cough. Keep the conversation fact-based where you can. That most people who get COVID-19 get mild symptoms and pets are not affected on the whole. Draw on information from reliable sources and that are appropriate to your child's age. If you don't know, can't find the answer, then it's fine to say that you don't know. There's lots of uncertainty at the moment and it's impossible to answer some of the questions that young people will ask. Rather than trying to remove all the uncertainty for them and find answers to all of their questions, it can be helpful to explain that there are things that we don't know and it's okay not to know. You can then reassure children by explaining that the adults around them will take care of them and that the scientists and doctors are working hard to find out how best to help. And there are many resources to give children and young people this information. Step 4. Helping them feel in control where they can. And highlighting why that is good for others too. There are lots of things that we can do to protect ourselves and help other people, like washing our hands, offering to buy groceries for people. Resource pack mentions you can help by washing your hands with soap and water, singing your favourite song for 20 seconds, using hand sanitizer, letting it dry for 20 seconds, trying not to touch your face with your hands, wearing a face mask, keeping socially distant, etc. Step 5. Be clear about the limit of your child's responsibilities. Let children know that the government, health service, scientists and many others are working to keep people safe. That is their job. There are some specific resources for when people experience problems with obsessions or compulsions. That's where it is particularly common for people to feel responsible for something bad happening, like passing on germs to other people or getting sick themselves. Step 6. Highlight the good things. Whilst it is a genuinely challenging time, you help children to recognise the positive things that are happening. For example, there are lots of people working hard to keep us all safe. The doctors and nurses at the hospitals, the scientists finding a vaccine, even us washing our hands. Point out the amazing community organisations that have formed and other action plans people are taking to help each other. Step 7. Finding ways to deal with worries. It can be easy for every waking hour to be dominated by worry, particularly with instant access to the news. Limit children's unsupervised exposure to the news. For example, you could introduce a news time when you look at it or listen to it together, discuss what comes up. For older children, if they are getting unhelpful information via social media, then could they experiment with limiting how much time they spend on it or what they look at? If they are talking to friends about it a lot, could they limit these conversations and instead try and talk about other things? Help children and young people to think about whether the worry is something they can do anything about or not. If it is not something that's under their control, it will be important to gradually learn to tolerate that worry and focus on other things. This is obviously a bit tricky to do, But one thing to help children to feel confident that their worries will be dealt with and also get into the practice of keeping them under control is to introduce a worry time where you can agree a time each day where you sit down for a certain amount of time, maximum 30 minutes, and talk through the worries in turn. Your job is to mostly listen and empathise. When children start to worry outside of worry time, ask them to record their worry and assure them that it will be dealt with at that time. This can also help them to notice that sometimes things that seem like big worries don't seem like such a problem after some time has passed. Do something positive, such as helping others. What do you think your child could do to help others? How would that make them feel to do something to help others? Those kind of feel-good chemicals. Do something fun. Enjoy some time together. Do something playful. Do some meditation or relaxation exercises together. And these are just some ideas that could help your child with some of their worries. So this is a worry tree, and you could talk your child through thinking about the worry that they're having, asking if there's anything that they can do about it. If no, letting the worry go, thinking about something else. If they can do something about it, make a plan. Think about what they're going to do to problem solve. And there's just some examples here taken from some of the resources that are recommended at the end of this webinar. Some ideas for under 12s, making coping cards, thinking about the sorts of activities that can help with their worries, whether that's listening to music, talking, exercise, drawing, whatever it might be. It's horses for courses, whatever they find helpful. There's a 7-minute animal workout, where younger children could do animal impressions. There's a whole body tense relaxation activity where children kind of work through their body, tensing and then relaxing their muscles. There's the 5 senses activity where you really stop to notice, what can I hear? What can I see? What can I smell? Etc. And the deep breathing, so really stopping and pausing and taking 5 deep breaths in and out. I'm thinking about tips for a good night's sleep. What helped with that sleep routine? And for teens, again, some of the activities are recommended in the resources at the end of this webinar. Things like thinking about social media and maybe muting unhelpful words that are generating anxiety. Tackling automatic negative thoughts, so they are kind of noticing a thought that's worrying them, thinking about what it is, and then maybe questioning it. How realistic is this thought? What would you say to your best friend if your best friend was having that thought? And distraction from those thoughts, perhaps doing a puzzle, listening to music, exercise, really positive for our well-being, mindfulness, visualization, lots of activities that children and young people can do to manage their worries. And finally, step 8, taking practical steps to feel less worried. Earlier on, we talked about the vicious cycle of anxiety and that some behaviours that can seem helpful can end up making the problem worse. We've talked about ways to deal with the worries. But also look out for behaviours like checking, being on the alert for danger, or washing hands in a way that goes beyond the medical advice. Encourage your child to experiment by reducing these behaviours, perhaps in line with what a trusted friend might do. What would their friend recommend in terms of how they wash their hands, or the amount of time they spend in their heads thinking about all of this? Sometimes there might be practical steps children can take. For example, if worries relate to others, encourage them to do more things that make them feel connected to those people when they're not able to see them in person. For example, texting, phoning, Skyping, writing to them. Inevitably, some children and young people will find this more difficult to deal with than others. Some young people may already be struggling with anxiety difficulties, and the current situation may have exacerbated pre-existing worries. If you are concerned about a child or young person and their anxiety is persistent, getting in the way of their lives, then they might need some professional help. Your GP will be able to advise further. And if there was one more thing to add, the importance of play, the importance of being playful, no matter what age your child is. And research definitely shows how helpful that play and being playful can be for our well-being. And playing with children of their own age is a buffer to anxiety and stress. It can build emotional regulation and empathy, which is developed through experience. When the conditions are right, we can experience big emotions without the usual consequences. And free play can really benefit our well-being. It increases that sense of control, how to make sense of things, how to express ourselves. It supports relationships, and it's enjoyable. And research with children and young people when they're in for hospital stage shows how much play really benefits them. It reduces stress and negative emotions. And outdoors is even better. Being connected to nature is better for our mental health. It's not just fluffy. This is shown by evidence. And even just seeing the natural environment can make us feel better. Those things that we can do that are exciting, thrilling, a little bit risky, can help us increase our sense of confidence and how our ability to cope. It gives us a better handling of uncertainty, and it can decrease our avoidance of situations. And there's lots of resources to help and support you. So, for example, there's some more information here about supporting your child's well-being during the pandemic. There's lots of information for children and young people. For example, BBC Newsround has a website. And then the last two are just some resource packs that we've referenced in the webinar. There's one for under 12s and one for teens with different activities to support them around COVID-19. There's plenty of national websites that can support young people's mental health and well-being. Anna Freud, Young Minds. And in terms of locally, there's our West Sussex local offer. Lots of information about local services and resources. And also there is a local offer page for parents to support them with the return to school in September. All the very best for the future, and thank you for listening.